Some say Julius Caesar did it. Others blame Christian mobs. Some even point to Muslim armies centuries later. Honestly, if history were a group project, the Library of Alexandria is the one everyone keeps saying, wasn't my fault. Let's drift through the timeline a bit. The first, and probably biggest, disaster happened around 48 BCE, when Julius Caesar got himself trapped in Alexandria during one of his conquer the world, seduce Cleopatra phases. He was fighting against Pompey's supporters, and as usual, things got messy. To block the enemy's fleet, Caesar ordered the ships in the harbor to be set on fire. You know, as one does. And since the docks were conveniently next to the library's storage buildings, well, let's just say papyrus doesn't have a great fire resistance rating. Ancient sources say 40,000 scrolls burned that day. Others say it was the library itself that went up in smoke. Caesar later wrote about the campaign, casually skipping over the part where he may have destroyed the world's biggest archive of knowledge. Classic PR move. But here's where it gets fun. And by fun, I mean frustrating. Some scholars argue that the main library actually survived that fire. Apparently what burned were just the scrolls stored in the port warehouses, kind of like their overflow storage. So, maybe not total destruction. Yet, because if history has taught us anything, it's that humanity never stops at one catastrophe. The library supposedly limped along for another few centuries, collecting more scrolls, breeding more scholars, and generally refusing to die. But by the 3rd century CE, things in Alexandria were getting chaotic again. The city had become a hotbed of political drama, religious tension, and the occasional riot, which, to be fair, sounds like any modern university campus. Enter Aurelian, a Roman emperor with a fondness for crushing rebellions. During his campaign to retake the city in 270 CE, parts of Alexandria were destroyed, including, you guessed it, the area around the Mouseion. Most historians believe the library didn't make it through that round either, so round 2, probably toast. But just to keep the tragedy marathon going, there was also the Serapeum, a smaller daughter library attached to a temple of Serapis. This was like the library's cool younger sibling, less grand, but still impressive. It supposedly survived the earlier fires and carried on the tradition of hoarding knowledge, until the 4th century, when Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, and tolerance for pagan temples dropped faster than Rome's budget surplus. In 391 CE, mobs, encouraged by the Emperor Theodosius's decrees, destroyed the Serapeum, and with it, probably the last remnants of Alexandria's literary treasure. At that point, the library wasn't even a library anymore. It was a legend, a cautionary tale whispered by scholars who suddenly realized maybe backing things up wasn't such a bad idea. Now, because humans love to overcomplicate tragedy, there's one more suspect in this case: Caliph Omar, the Muslim ruler who conquered Egypt in the 7th century CE. Centuries later, some writers claimed he ordered the remaining scrolls to be burned, supposedly saying, if they agree with the Quran, they're unnecessary. If they disagree, they're heretical. Which, even if true, sounds like something no rational administrator would actually say when faced with literal tons of paperwork. Modern historians generally agree that this story is, well, made up, a medieval legend created to pin the blame somewhere convenient, because everyone wants the final word on who killed the library. But maybe the real truth is less dramatic. Maybe the library didn't die in a single blaze of glory. Maybe it just faded, neglect, war, humidity, bureaucracy, the slow-motion apocalypse that ruins everything eventually. By the time medieval travelers wandered through Alexandria, there was nothing left but sand, ruins, and the echoes of what once was. No papyrus, no scrolls, not even a reading list. Imagine it, hundreds of years of human thought, gone. Mathematical theories, lost plays, forgotten histories, entire philosophies wiped out before anyone could copy them. All because humanity hadn't yet invented the cloud. And yet somehow the story of the library still feels alive. It's the symbol of everything fragile about knowledge. The reminder that brilliance can burn away faster than we can preserve it. We like to imagine it as a single tragic event, because that's easier to mourn. But in reality, the library's death was just slow entropy, a soft fade out, which in a way feels more fitting for a bedtime story. Let's drift a little deeper, into the people behind the library. Because while everyone remembers the flames, almost no one remembers the minds who built it. These were scholars who genuinely believed knowledge could make the world better. And honestly, that's kind of adorable. Hey guys, welcome back to another midnight ramble through humanity's biggest oops moments. So go ahead, dim the lights, maybe make yourself some tea, and let's sink into the quiet hum of the ancient world. Tonight, we're talking about something that manages to be both deeply tragic and somehow completely predictable. The Lost Library of Alexandria. Yeah, the one everyone keeps calling the greatest library that ever existed, which, let's be honest, is kind of impressive considering no one actually knows what was in it. Let's set the mood. Imagine Egypt, around the 3rd century BCE. Sunshine, marble courtyards, everyone in linen, and the faint scent of olive oil and ambition. Alexander the Great had swept through like a golden-haired thunderstorm, doing his usual, I'm conquering everything routine, and then suddenly, he dies. Classic Alexander move. His empire gets split up like a messy family inheritance, and one of his generals, Ptolemy the First Soter, decides to grab Egypt for himself. Because who doesn't want to rule the land of pyramids and sandstorms? Now, Ptolemy wasn't just another sword-swinging warlord. He had ideas. He wanted to turn Alexandria, this brand new coastal city founded by Alex himself, into the intellectual capital of the world. Basically, if Athens was the cool, artsy cousin, Ptolemy wanted Alexandria to be the smug older sibling who read everything. So what do you do if you want to look cultured in the ancient world? You build a library, and not just a few shelves in a temple somewhere. No, this was meant to be the library, the Google of the ancient Mediterranean. Except, with more papyrus and fewer cat memes. Ptolemy started gathering scholars, poets, and philosophers from everywhere he could find them. He built a grand complex called the Mouseion, literally the Temple of the Muses. It wasn't just a library, it was a full-on research campus. Think of it as an ancient university with free food, housing, and way too many scrolls. The scholars who lived there were basically the influencers of their day, except instead of skincare routines, they debated the shape of the universe. They studied medicine, astronomy, mathematics, linguistics, and probably complained about the food. Among them were legends like Euclid, the father of geometry, and Eratosthenes, the guy who somehow calculated the circumference of the Earth without even leaving Egypt. He was off by only a few miles. Meanwhile, I can't even fold a map correctly. The library itself? We don't have blueprints, but everyone agrees it was vast. Some ancient writers claimed it held 400,000 scrolls. Others said 700,000. Of course, ancient writers were also known for exaggerating literally everything. So who knows? Still, even if you cut that number in half, it's staggering. Imagine room after room filled with scrolls, on shelves and jars, stacked in corners. No digital backup, no fireproofing, just dry papyrus, a Mediterranean climate, and the eternal optimism of humans who've clearly never owned a candle. And how did they get all those scrolls? Well, Ptolemy had a system, a slightly evil one. Every ship that docked in Alexandria had to surrender its books, Officials would take them to the library, make a copy, and return the copy to the ship. The original stayed. It was called the policy of confiscation, which sounds better than state-sponsored book theft, but it worked. Over decades, the library grew into the ultimate brain hoard. They had texts from Greece, Persia, India, even some early translations of Hebrew and Egyptian writings. Basically, if it could be written, they wanted it. Now, the exact vibe inside the library? We can only guess. But I like to imagine rows of scholars half asleep over oil lamps, scribbling notes in Greek, muttering about Aristotle, and occasionally setting things on fire by accident. Because yes, open flames were everywhere. You see where this is going, right? The library's destruction is one of those historical tragedies that's so blurry, it might as well be a bedtime ghost story. No one can even agree on when it burned or how many times.